and welcome to this presentation on flexibility. Flexibility is one of the key components of physical fitness. Today we're going to look at how to improve your flexibility. So we're going to look at it through the eyes of the FIT principle. That's the principle related to overload. So frequency, intensity, time and type, FIT. First thing we're going to look at is different types of stretching. So you may think, what different types of stretching are there? Surely there's just stretching. Well, stretching falls into two categories: static, without movement, and dynamic or ballistic with movement. So that's static, without movement, or dynamic, ballistic with movement. Static stretching, if I was to perform a static stretch from my front of my legs here, my quadriceps, and move the muscle until it's under mild tension and hold it at that point. And it's the holding it there that gives static stretching its name. So that's static stretching, and that stretch was performed actively. And the active part relates to the fact that I stretched my muscle. I stretched it myself. So that's active stretching, static active stretching. So the other static stretch is performed passively. And to perform a stretch passively, you would need a friend to help you. And as you know, I have no friends, but I could tell you how to perform the stretch passively. I could show you. So if I was to lie down like this, and I wanted to stretch the back of my legs, and move the leg back towards my torso, and at the minute I'm performing a static, active stretch. I'm stretching my own muscle. If a partner was to come in, and I was to lie back and relax, and they are to move my leg back towards my torso, that is going to be passive stretching. So they would bring the muscle to the point of tension and hold it there for me. Then I would be passive in that stretch. So it would be static, passive stretching. So there are two sorts of stretching. They both have their advantages. Obviously, active stretching, a major advantage, is that you can do that yourself. So if you're devising a fitness program, you don't need someone else to be there in order you to improve your flexibility. The other good thing about it is that you're under complete control of the stretch, so you can make it as safe as you can. You can feel how under tension your muscle is. An advantage to passive stretching is that it's a social activity, so it's quite good for teams to be involved in. You have to help each other to stretch, and that a partner can maybe move your muscle slightly further than you can. So sometimes it's hard to move your muscle as far as you can, but someone else can help you, and you'll often see that sort of stretching used in gymnastics. So if you go much to gymnastics training session, particularly if they're a little bit older, you might see the coach or you might see fellow gymnasts helping each other stretch. So that's static stretching, actively and passively. The other sort of stretching is dynamic. And dynamic stretching is really moving the muscle to the point where it feels under tension with movement. So if I was to stretch my chest, my shoulders, dynamically, I might do something like this. So moving the muscle back to the point under tension with movement. It's a little bit like taking an elastic band and pulling it repeatedly like that. And hopefully you're going to get an improvement in your flexibility that way. Now, just from that, you might think to yourself, there are some obvious concerns about stretching dynamically. It's not something I would ever recommend to someone following a health-related fitness program. Usually, in my experience, performed by people that have quite a high level of fitness already. So people like UPE students, perhaps. But because you're bringing the muscle back to the point under tension with movement, there's an obvious risk that you could pull the muscle. So stretching is always a balance between looking for improvement and the safety aspect of not wanting to pull the muscle. So another dynamic stretch, maybe for the back of the legs, be this one. So bring the muscle to the point where it's under tension, and then bounce on the muscle. Now, many people have told me different things about stretching. Someone once said to me, never bounce on your stretching. It wasn't a bad piece of advice. But athletes perhaps that use movements that bring their body into extreme positions, like a high jumper or a hurdler or gymnast at speed, might like dynamic stretching because it sort of replicates those movements. Generally, I would advise static stretching first and then dynamic stretching. But there's quite a big debate in the fitness world about the best way to perform flexibility exercises. So we've looked at so far static stretching, actively and passively, and dynamic stretching. So they're the different sorts of stretching that we're going to look at. Now what about the other aspects, frequency, intensity and time? Well, to improve your flexibility, you really, if you're statically stretching, going to hold for 20 to 30 seconds. So that's 20 to 30 seconds of the muscle at the point of stretch. So that's the time. Now, you could obviously do that more than once within a training session. So you could have a couple of repetitions of 20 to 30 seconds. If you're performing a stretch dynamically, you might do 20 to 60 repetitions. So I might do this 20 times. And again, I could do a number of sets of those within a training session. So 20 to 60, and that's for improving flexibility. Most of the time in our training sessions, you'll probably remember we hold between 8 to 12 seconds for static stretching. We're not really working on improving our flexibility then, we're just working on preparing our body for the training session. So 20 to 30 seconds for improvement, so that's the time element. Intensity, so how hard do we stretch? Well, it's been quite interesting over the years to watch different people within a class setting stretching. It's obviously a very personal thing. Everybody has a different level of flexibility, as with all aspects of their fitness. But to see how far someone will push themselves. If you go to a gymnastic session especially, sometimes reminiscent of medieval torture. You see really excruciating pain on the face of people as they're being stretched sometimes, particularly at a higher level. So it's a very personal thing, intensity. Obviously, the further we stretch the muscle, the more intense we make it, the more likely we are progression, adaptation will happen. But that always has to be balanced against safety. So it's a very important thing, and it's a kind of one of those ones where you need to encourage people to have a good feel for their own body. So how does your muscle feel, and how far can you go before it's going to be too far? So that's intensity. How about frequency? Well, for maintenance of flexibility, you might get away with one session a week. So one session of flexibility work might maintain your level of flexibility, but if we want to see an improvement, then we're going to need to see maybe at least 2 sessions, and what I'll be looking for in your training program is probably 4 or 5 sessions of flexibility. That'll really mean that we'll hopefully see some progression. So it's not going to guarantee progression, because that depends a lot on the intensity with which you actually stretch. But 2, from my experience, and you can probably see some progression. 2 a week, that is. So that's frequency, intensity, time, and type. And that's the end of this presentation on flexibility. Thank you.